Hey, somebody's got to light the grill. You have? Excellent. Good morning, afternoon, or evening. You are listening to the Professional Noticer. Hello, everyone. I'm Andy Andrews. Hey, thank you for making me a part of your week. My purpose here today and with every show we do is to play the part of a best friend or a coach. I want to help you live the life of your wildest dreams by giving you access to the greatest mentors the world has to offer today. The Professional Noticer is sponsored this week by our friends at Tucker ATV. You know, the sheer variety of power sport products at Tucker ATV will blow your mind. Hustlers, zero-turn mowers, the entire line of Echo power tools, and of course, Tucker ATV carries every make and model of Polaris ATVs and side-by-sides. But you have to see the showroom to believe this place. The taxidermy, the antique displays, along with a customer service porch inside with its porch swing, comfortable chairs, television, and free coffee. At Tucker ATV, they treat customers like family, which is why folks from 14 states have done business with this place. Tucker ATV, Highway 43 North in Jackson, Alabama, the small town business with the national reputation. Observations and answers, that's what we do here on the Professional Noticer. And as you know, if you're a regular listener or viewer of this podcast, you know we love it when somebody comes to the table with both. And they've got some observations and they've got some answers. And we have that situation today. We've got a guy who represents the technology industry with a passion, but that passion has kind of morphed into different types of expertise in different areas. He actually has one of the most listened to podcasts in America, and it's like in the top 0.5% of the business podcasts in America. It's called Counsel Culture, and he's a new friend of mine, and he teaches people to be better versions of themselves. He's a husband and a father of 7 children from St. Paul, Minnesota. Please welcome Eric Brooker. Hey, Eric.
We were just talking about the introduction that you used to have early in your career and how the bar keeps going up and up and up. That was a heck of an introduction, but thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. I'm excited about the conversation.
Man, talking with you a couple of times over the past couple of weeks, I have been excited about having you on because I just know this is just you have a ton of perspective about leadership and culture, and that's really where I want to go right off the bat. You know, where did that start that you got so interested in that? And I think that most people don't have the vision to combine the two like you have. People either talk about culture or they talk about leadership, but man, I think you have it nailed. So where did your interest in that start?
Well, that's a great question. And it really started, a little bit of background. I'm 41. I'll be 42 later this week. And I've been in the business world for 21, 22 years. And I've had a myriad of different jobs. I've had the opportunity to work for great leaders, good cultures, bad leaders. And I'll just leave it at to be respectful, I had one of the worst jobs I've ever had, what I'll call a number of years ago. And what I started to learn is that it was a bad job, despite the fact that at the time I was making more money than I had ever made. And I liked a couple of the people at the office. They touted themselves as having a great company culture and having strong leadership. And it wasn't until I was there for a few weeks, the rose-colored glasses come off, and I start to realize this is a bad culture with good people, but bad leaders. And I set out after I left that job, actually probably even before I left that job, to figure out where I went wrong as an individual, because the job was attractive. Certainly some of it had to do with the money. Some of it had to do with the interview process. But I got sold what I'll call a bill of bad goods. And I didn't blame anybody for that. That was my fault. But how can I learn from that to not make the same mistake again? And that's really how the podcast got started, was I want to have conversations with good leaders, with companies and organizations that have tremendous cultures so I can continue to learn. But I've been fortunate to offer that wisdom of my guests to other people. So I've gone on this journey to just continue to learn so I don't make this same mistake again, and hopefully others don't as well.
The culture thing it's something that I think about all day, every day too. And I think it's amazing to me, what you just described there with that company kind of advertising that they had a great culture. It's one of the first things that I noticed, that companies, just because you put it on your business card doesn't, it doesn't mean anything. And just because it's on the company brochure, I mean, usually some marketing person wrote the company brochure, and I can't tell you how many businesses that I've been into and worked with that it seems like that the marketing says like, we are this and we are this and we are this and we do this, and they just wrote what they thought sounded good. They didn't even watch anybody or talk to anybody that worked there. And then the people that worked there, they didn't even read the brochure. And so I don't know how that, comes together like that, but it sure does seem like it happens a lot. I think that people don't get to say their culture. Don't you think that we're the ones who decide their culture, really?
So my tagline is leadership is a choice and culture is contagious. I believe that anyone in an organization, anyone from the janitor to the CEO, can be a leader in a business. I believe that the culture of an organization starts at the top. One could argue the culture of a household starts at the top as well. My kids don't get to determine the culture, but where culture is really influential is, to your point, it's not the vinyl lettering on the wall. It's not what's on the back of a business card. It's not the things, and you articulated it very well. It's not the things that we say. It's the things that we do. When you get to the office early and you see the CEO's there sitting at his desk and the coffee's made and there's fresh donuts and the floor is swept, that's not leadership. That's culture. The CEO's willingness to do what it takes to do the job, to help others be successful. That's culture. When you see the CEO washing a window, when you see the CEO holding a door and being mindful of the people around them and not just the company mission to make more money, that's culture.
And this is so good. This is so good because it's a distinction that I think that a lot of people just they don't make. And I think there's a lot of leaders who talk culture, but they don't really understand it themselves. Now, you mentioned the home. I think when most people think of leadership and culture, they're thinking of generally business or work. So how does leadership and culture manifest itself at home?
Well, I'll talk about how it manifests itself in my home as a man of faith, as a family of faith. I can't expect anything out of my kids that I'm not also willing to do. And take it out of the faith perspective. I ask a lot of our kids to maintain the house, to maintain just the order of the house. And living in St. Paul, as you mentioned, sometimes it's plowing the drive or shoveling the driveway. Sometimes it's mowing the yard. But most days it's little things like taking the trash or recycle out. It's emptying the dishwasher or straightening the bathroom because we're having guests over. But what I've learned over the years, and I'll give credit to my parents, what I've learned over the years is that I understand the importance of culture and leadership of the home because of what they taught me, because of their willingness to empty the dishwasher, do the dishes, take the trash out, that when they ask me, I began to recognize as a young child, these are just the things that you do. Culture, the way you speak in your home, the way you speak to your spouse, the way you speak to your children, and both at home and in the office. I'm going to name drop just for the purposes of recognizing a woman, Amy Bailey. I was interviewing someone years ago for a job. Amy knew this woman quite well. They had worked together in a past life. And I said, Amy, I'm thinking about bringing her on. She's interviewed very, very well. I'm calling for some advice. Would you recommend her? And all she said, Eric, take her out to lunch. I said, Amy, I don't want to take her out to lunch. I want to know whether or not I should hire her. And she simply said, I'm not going to give you a reference point other than to tell you, you can learn a lot about a person by the way they treat a server at a restaurant. And that at home or at the office, the way they treat the postman, the way they treat the person at FedEx or the grocery store. But at home, those are the things that our kids look for. Our interactions with the neighbors, our interactions with the clerk at the grocery store or the barista at Starbucks are as important as the way I treat my spouse, because our kids, we are an example. We are the primary example to our kids on leadership and culture.
And I so agree with that. And I think it's so important. I think it's so important that I can honestly say you could probably ramp that up about taking somebody to lunch and seeing how they treat people. You know, I've got a friend who has a big company, and before he hires executives, he takes the person and their spouse to dinner. He and his wife do. And I asked him one time, I said, have you ever whiffed on one? And he said, in all the years, like twice. And I said, really, twice? I said, you wanna never whiff? And I was really kind of teasing, but the more I thought about it, the more this made sense. And he said, yeah, what do you mean? I said, well, don't just take the husband and wife. Take their kids with them.
Wow.
Because, you know, a husband and wife, I mean, we can fake anything, but you can't fake the kids. I mean, you watch those kids, you'll see what's being taught in that house. You'll see what kind of respect and what kind of leadership is going on. You'll see. You can't fake the kids. So,
you know, it's interesting. My wife and I 15 minutes ago had a conversation. We have a child. I'll leave them nameless. There's 7, so you can determine which one you think it is. But we have a child that's been pretty disrespectful to us as of late. She's pretty disrespectful to her siblings, and we're trying to figure out, we're not big on punishment, but she's reached a level where she's yelling at us as her parents. She's throwing things at the kids. 4 girls, so you still don't know which one it is. And this is uncharacteristic of the things that we see in our house. So the first thing I want to identify as a father, and I think this goes for a coworker or someone that works for you that's having challenges in the office. What am I doing as a parent or as a boss to not serve them well, to see this behavior at home or in the office? For our daughter, we've addressed that. She's going through something. Either she's not addressing it or it's hormones. Either way, the consequence has to be commensurate to what she's done. And right now, what she's proving is that she can't communicate well, candidly, outside of her bedroom. So we need to talk through as parents what we can do to be better examples to her. Again, I think this starts with us because we're the leaders of the household. But also, there needs to be a commensurate, and I hate the word punishment, but I can't figure out another word at the moment. There's got to be a commensurate punishment that isn't punitive, but it's an opportunity for her to learn. She's got to learn from this. The last punishments that we've given have been books that you can gain these privileges back after you read a particular book and after you write a report on the book. And the book isn't Moby Dick. The book isn't anything like that. The book is about the behavior that we're not seeing. One of the books that we have the kids read is called The Outward Mindset by an organization called the Arbinger Institute. It's this idea that and I'll dumb it down. It's my fault. If something is wrong, if Andy and I aren't communicating well and I get frustrated at Andy, it's my fault because I've done something that's forcing this communication to not go well. And kids in particular, or coworkers, I guess, we tend to point the finger. Well, my problem at work is Andy. My problem at work is John. No, your problem at work is probably you, and your problem at home is probably you. And that's been a great book. But again, I don't want it to be punitive. I want them to learn from it.
Well, I apologize for laughing there when you were talking about getting her to read a book, because I just happened to think about how many times people have told me, our child this, that, and we made our child read your book. And I just thought, wow, I'm used as punishment. Thank you. But you're right about that responsibility thing, and that it's my fault, because I always kind of think that there's control there. There's some control there. I mean, and so I'm fine for it to be my fault. I'm fine to look at myself, because if it is me, I can do something about it. If it's you, what can I do about you? And it's different if it's a child, but in general, I do want to kind of point the finger at me, because I can figure me out. I can do something about me.
And that doesn't always mean it's your fault and there's a way out. It doesn't always mean that it's your fault and it's no way out. Go back to the very first question: why culture and leadership? And it was because of a bad job. I don't blame that company for hiring me. I don't blame them for their culture or their leadership. I blame myself for not seeing the forest through the trees and seeing what I was walking into before I actually got there. Now, I had a responsibility, once I recognized there were some cultural and leadership issues, to try and fix them. But as an employee, I can only do so much. So I ascertained over about a 6-month period that all the things that I'm doing, they're not working. And either I don't have the skill set or I'm not the right guy. I opted to leave that organization. I wish them well. I saw them this week. They're doing great, and I want nothing but success for them. It just wasn't the right environment for me.
Right. If a company or a family, but specifically a company, if a company's culture is bad, I mean, can it be fixed? And if yes, what's the first run at it?
Can I do this like we're playing a trivia game and just ask for the next question? This is only because this is a really difficult one. I've worked for companies over the years. Your listeners have worked for companies with great cultures. What you get when you have a great culture is people that want to work harder to help the overall company vision. If I've got a good culture and good leaders around me, your staff is working harder and smarter and more efficiently. When you have a bad company, I'm not working less because I'm looking for a job or I'm on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram. I have zero motivation. So fixing your company culture is absolutely critical. But you wake up one day, you've read a book, you've listened to an Andy Andrews podcast, you recognize, gosh, this is not the company I envisioned running. I personally believe it is, and I'll use the magic word leadership, it is a sign of tremendous leadership to pull the entire company together via email, via Zoom, get them all together for lunch, depending on the size of the company, and just walking down that path, walking them down the journey of, I started a company in my garage with this vision of employing people, making society better, making a widget, selling a widget, and helping. And what I have turned, again, this is my fault. What I have turned this company into is we're not innovative. We're not thoughtful of one another. We're not employee first. We're not customer first. We're a self-centered organization. And that's not on you. That's on me as the CEO or the president of the company or the senior business leader of a division of an organization. And I'm determined to fix it. I think the hardest part for a true leader, I've talked to a lot of leaders about leadership and culture over the year. And this is a tough question because so many of them respond to me, Eric, that's not a sign of leadership. That's a sign of weakness. If you know that you're failing as a leader and you pull your team or your company aside and say, I am failing you. I want more for us. And some of that might be, we're going to bring consultants in to help us learn how to fix it. Some of it might be we're going to take the lettering off the wall and we're going to take our mission statement, our vision, our cultural statement off the business card until we figure out who we are and what we're really all about. But when you put it back on the wall, when you print it back on the business cards, you've got to live it out. And I'm telling you, the team around you has to see you living it out. The worst thing that any company has is someone that does not fit culturally. Again, I look at it as a willingness to pick up the broom. I look at it as a willingness to wash the windows and make the cup of coffee, because none of them are your job as the CEO, but they're all your job to represent positive leadership and the culture you want to see in your organization.
I agree. I grew up in Alabama and still live in Alabama. And so to college football fans, that means Bear Bryant. And,
yeah, right.
And so, one of the things that I didn't really notice until I kind of thought about it as an adult is that he never really, he had some bad seasons, but he never really got a lot of problems from the press or got the fans on him or anything. And I believe that a big part of that, and I work with college coaches now, and so I talk to them and I tell them this story because I think there is a humility that works if it's real and it's a chosen kind of process, even in a type A personality. And with Bear Bryant, I noticed that when the team would win, it was always because they had good parents and these were good kids and they had character and they had heart and they could fight back when they were behind, and these parents raised them right, and that's what he would say when they won. But when they lost, he would say they obviously were not prepared, and that's a coaching problem, and I'm the head coach, and so that's something that I have to work on. And when you go and say, yeah, that's on me, I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I think it's a sign of reality. I think it's a sign of strength, and I think that people respect that in a way that, when you say, well, the quarterback, if he hadn't have thrown an interception, and if our linemen, you got people yeah-yahing about you about that, but if you say, hey, they weren't prepared, that's a coaching problem, I'm the head coach, what are you going to say to that?
What's interesting is you bring up coaching, and I think sports is a great analogy for life. I don't think of Bear Bryant. I don't live in Alabama. I think of John Wooden. Wooden, UCLA's John Wooden. He was the first man at the gym. He was the last man out. He would pick up the basketballs. And over the course of time, if you learn about John Wooden, first of all, when his team won, when they'd win a championship, it was never we played well or it was so-and-so. It was Kareem that got 42 points and 17 rebounds. It was coach did everything we needed. He taught us our weaknesses on the offense. He showed us a couple things that we could do on the defense. These players were so humble, but it's because they had a tremendous leader. I interviewed someone, Swen Nader, that played professional basketball, but he went to UCLA and was a backup center for Bill Walton. So he was coached by John Wooden. He talked about that coach taught us everything. He taught us how to tie our shoes because there was a way in which you tied your shoes. And he said, Eric, I still put my socks on every morning the same way that John Wooden taught me in college how to put my socks on. This might be a dumb question, Andy. I don't know another way to put a sock on than the way I've been doing it for 41 years. But Coach Wooden had a way and a methodology, and he was such a tremendous leader. Swen Nader is in his 70s and still puts his socks on the way his college basketball coach taught him to, because he was such a tremendous leader.
Yeah, I've got a John Wooden basketball right over there, and
awesome.
He he would sit them down first day of practice, and he said, "Gentlemen, this is how we put our socks on."
Yeah.
And he said, "Now let me tell you why. It's because I don't care how great you are. We need every member of the team, and one little blister can take you out. And so this is why we're learning how to put our socks on." I mean, isn't that amazing?
But that's another thing that I don't think we talk about enough from a culture and leadership perspective is I talked to Swen during our recording. I've read all the books. Coach Wooden got rid of a few players over the years. It's because they were, the words that we use now is they were toxic for the culture. And if there's someone in your organization that is toxic, it's highly likely you're not going to fix that person and they need to exit the business. But the bigger concern is if when you're looking at your org chart and looking to see, do I have anybody that's cancerous or toxic to the organization, and you don't have anybody, the first person that you need to look at is yourself. And I will say that if you are that toxic person, you need to either correct it immediately, and I would go seek help. And all I mean by that is find a business leader in a different organization, an executive coach, and again, acknowledge that, hey, I believe that I'm bad for the business, but I'm committed to the business and I want to fix it. Or do yourself a favor, even if you're the founder and CEO of the business, exit the business and let someone else run it. Because again, in the long run, that will serve you and all of those around you better.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, your buddy, he almost started at UCLA because Walton was one of the ones who almost got, and it was over a beard. Remember?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Yeah, Wooden had a rule against facial hair, and Bill Walton went to him and said, "I think I have a right to have facial hair if I want to." And he said, "Well, Bill, the team doesn't have facial hair." And Walton said, "But I believe I have a right to have it, and I want to have it." And Wooden said, "Well, okay, then we'll miss you." Bill said, "What do you mean?" He said, "We'll miss you because you won't be on the team. The team doesn't do this." So
I love it. And he complied, and Bill Walton goes down as one of the greatest centers in UCLA and the NBA history.
Right. 7 national championships in a row they had at UCLA under Wooden, which is just insane. Who's a great example of leadership in your life, Eric?
Wow. That's a tough question. You know, there's 2 people that come to mind, and I will say the first one, in fact, I'm going to change it. I'm going to still give you 2. I'm going to tell you that my parents are probably the best examples of leadership in my life. My folks got divorced when I was 4 or 5 years old. They split up. They always lived in the same city. In fact, at one point, my dad and his wife, my stepmom, they bought a house in the neighborhood. But they didn't buy a house in the neighborhood because that was the house they wanted to live in or the neighborhood they wanted to live in. They wanted to help us as the children of divorce live a better life. And I watched my mom, we talk about a lot about equality. My mom was a woman in technology before women were in technology. And she was an incredible business leader. She owned her own business, was wildly successful. She put the hours in and did what it takes. But my mom in particular had a real fascination with helping others reach their goals. And it was fascinating to watch her. And their goals might not be that I want to work here forever. It was, hey, I want to go write a book. I want to go star in a movie. I want to go be in a play. She would help in any way that she could help them achieve their goals. And my dad, this is an interesting one because we have very little in common politically, religiously. We just don't see eye to eye on anything. And yet my dad, over the years from my childhood to today, I got off the phone with him an hour ago, is such a great example of leadership. He was dating my stepmom. It's a great story. He was dating my stepmom. They were on their 3rd date, and she was talking about my stepsister's bike that just didn't quite fit. And my dad said, "I think I can fix it. Why don't I stop by tomorrow morning? Your daughter's going to be home. I'll stop by and fix the bike." And my stepmom said, "I knew he was the one when the next morning he did exactly as he said he was going to do. He came over to the house, helped with the bike. So again, for me, it's my parents. I can think of a boss I had recently, a gentleman named Sean Sands, doing what you say you're going to do, when you say you're going to do it, every single time. And if for some reason my dad did it, my mom did it, Sean Sands did it, if for some reason you're going to fail, Andy, I've told you I'm writing a book. We talked about having a deadline of self-imposed of December 31st. If I'm not going to hit that deadline, I need to let the appropriate people know well in advance I'm not going to hit that goal. And here's why. And here's what I'm going to do to overcome it as best as I can. And as a business leader, I think we have an obligation. Again, do what you say you're going to do every time, or admit it in advance that there's a reason I'm not able to, and have a backup plan so you can still succeed. It might just take a little bit longer to get there.
Yeah, man, that's great. And that your parents were those kind of people. That's huge. That's huge. You have interviewed so many people on Counsel Culture. I looked at your list and I'm just kind of blown away. And so I wouldn't ask you to go through that list, but what are some of the things that you have, I guess maybe that you've learned, because you're the expert on it, and yet you're having guests on, and occasionally somebody's got to trip up and say something you didn't know. What are some of the things that you've learned or that surprised you, from your guests on your podcast?
So I started a podcast in my home office with a microphone and zero experience. And because I had zero experience, I just decided that I initially needed the biggest names that I could possibly find to be on my show. And so I have reached out to the CEO of T-Mobile. I have I've had conversations with a mutual friend of ours, John O'Leary. I just spoke to the founder of Reebok, the founder of Anytime Fitness. Anytime Fitness has 5,000 locations. I've talked to some of the most successful businessmen, businesswomen, parents, doctors out there in the field of culture and leadership. And what I have found, Andy, you included, because you've been a guest on my show, and in fact, I tried to honor you beforehand, there's a genuine care that these business leaders have in common, that John O'Leary has, that Andy Andrews has, that Dave Mortensen at Anytime Fitness has, that Mike Sievert, the CEO of T-Mobile. There's a genuine care that it's not Andy Andrews or John O'Leary looking to do something for John O'Leary. I had Monty Moran. Monty was the CEO for Chipotle. He started when they had 800 employees. He left when they were just shy of 80,000 employees. And I asked him, what was the most meaningful? This is a tough question. He was there for 12 years. Monty, what was the most meaningful experience that you walked away from? And he said two things. The first one, I spoke to 20,000 of my coworkers. He didn't call them employees. He called them coworkers. And I said, you spoke to 20,000. He goes, Eric, some of them were 10-minute conversations. A lot of them were an hour. Some of them were laughing. Some of them we cried together. But he said the next most important thing was being able to promote people to what in that industry is called restaurateur. Being able to take someone that started in the kitchen that now runs their own restaurant or runs a number of restaurants as a district manager. These people that are at the top, the pinnacle, what we would look at as the pinnacle, they care. They genuinely care. And the other one, I interviewed a guy, in fact, that episode will air this week, a gentleman by the name of Ryan Leake. He's written a book called Chasing Failure. I asked him a question I asked you as well. What's one question you wish people would ask you, but they don't? And his question that he wished people would ask, and it's had me thinking about the people that I work for, guys like you, all the folks that have been on my podcast. He said, I wish people would ask me what the cost of my success is. And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, Eric, I haven't been to a birthday party in 5 years. I haven't been to a wedding in probably the same, because I'm booked Probably like you, 2 years in advance, he said. People don't plan birthday parties 2 years in advance so Ryan Leake can come. They don't plan weddings 2 years in advance so Ryan Leake can come. But the cost of success is insurmountable for many of us. And as we try and reach what we desire in terms of our professional or even personal goals, I think the question that I'm starting to ask myself is, am I willing to make the sacrifices necessary to achieve my goals? And I think Andy Andrews did it. I think Monty Moran did it. I think Ryan Leake has done it. And I think we all want more money. We want more fame. We want more notoriety, but it comes at a cost. And the folks that I've talked to have been willing to make an incredible amount of sacrifices for themselves, personally and professionally, so they can build a business and help others reach their goals.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think that, I would look at you and I would say, I think that you measure those choices. I think you measure those sacrifices, because, we've all thought about like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and, that kind of success. And I look at, I told somebody not too long ago, I look at Bill Gates and I think that if I was facing a life where I was going to be in court around the world the rest of my life, I would give $150 billion to somebody and say, okay, I'm just going to keep like a billion and you guys just don't ever call me again. But, there is a measurable sacrifice that you have to make and that your families have to make. There was a time that I was gone a lot more than I am now.
Yeah.
And so it is something that you have to choose. Boy, what a great question.
You bring up Bill Gates, and he's an interesting one because he's a notable. Until that question was answered, I always had these visions of being someone that was quietly famous, someone that could walk through the grocery store, go to the movie theater, go to a restaurant, and not be, publicly seen, pointed out, hey, that's Eric Brooker. Bill Gates, I watched Bill Gates. I'm embarrassed to say this as a grown adult. I was watching Bill Gates on Ellen DeGeneres years ago, and they had such a great contest between him and an audience member. And the question was, how much is this grocery store product? And he lost. He didn't, I think he said a package of diapers, like 100 diapers was $4. Bill Gates hasn't been to a grocery store in 25 years. He has and that doesn't see, as a guy with 7 kids, I'll make that sacrifice, but he can't go to the movies. He can't go to the gym. There's right. All these things that he can't do. But I talked to my boss yesterday on the Las Vegas Strip as we were wrapping up a conference, and we had a great conversation about this question. He talked to me. I might get in trouble for this. I'm going to do it anyway. He talked to me about the founder of our company, his business partner, and we were talking about the sacrifices. He says, Eric, at one point in the very early days, Joel, our CEO, went to get a tire repaired on his minivan. And the gentleman at the tire store said, sir, not only can I not repair it, I can't let you leave with these 4 tires. They're bald and it is not safe. And Joel said, I can't buy them today. I simply don't have the money. Now, the reason he brought that story up is because Joel has been very, very vocal about the tire store all those years since, because the gentleman said, I'm going to put 4 tires on and you pay me when you can. And Joel has obviously since paid for them. But the sacrifices that Joel made to employ the 75 people that work for our company along the way, where he could have just gone out and gotten a day job like most of us have, but he decided he wanted something bigger, and that comes at a cost.
Yeah. I figure that you and I are probably the right level of famous because neither, I'm not famous enough that people go, oh, there's Andy Andrews. I figure I'm famous enough that people look at me and go, did I go to high school with you?
I told you I was in Las Vegas earlier this week, and it's an annual trade show for my industry. There's about 8,000 people that show up. And I could not, I'm embarrassed to say this, and humbled, very much humbled at the same time. There's 8,000 people that know who Eric Brooker is. And sitting at dinner at a restaurant and having people walk into the restaurant or wave from the window, Eric Brooker, we haven't met. I know you. You're connected to so and so, and this is how I know you, and you're doing great work. And I'm really honored by that. But I don't want to be famous. I want people to question, it was I on the most wanted poster, or did I go to high school with that guy? Yeah.
My wife and I have a private joke, which means I guess it's not going to be private now. but years ago, when I was doing a lot of TV, and there was people would come and they talk to you while you're eating, and this guy, my wife and I were in a restaurant, and this actually happened just like this. This guy comes over and says, "Hey, I see you on TV," and I said, "Oh, well, okay, thanks," and he said, "Yeah, da 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 da," and I said, "Oh, that, yeah," and he asked some question, and I answer it, and he stands there, and he asks another question, and I had said, "Well, nice to meet you," a couple of times, and I said, "Well, hope to see you again," a couple of times, and man, after 4 or 5 minutes, he's still standing there. That's a long time for somebody to stand there while you're looking up, and you got your fork in your hand, your wife's right there, and the guy he actually says this. I'm not making this up. He actually said, it's like really irritating when people come up to, well-known people, and they just like bother them while they're eating and stuff. And he said, that's what killed Elvis. And to this day, when my wife and I are, when we're out and there's some uncomfortable situation, and we walk away from it, one of us will look at the other and go, "Yeah, that's what killed Elvis."
Hey, I'm gonna put you on the spot, and if I shouldn't, you'll have to edit this out. But you told me a story after we recorded our podcast that's very near and dear to my heart. But I think it's important to talk about if you have a great talent, if you have a great skill as a leader. Let's keep this to leadership and culture. You have to share that talent with others. You shared a story that's close to me. You've since sent me a book, and I'm incredibly grateful for it. But the story you shared was that you went to a breakfast meeting years ago, not to be the keynote speaker, not to be a guest host or anything like that. You were a guy in the audience, and the host pointed you out, and that turned into a conversation. I would love for you to share that, because I think you have, by my count, written 28 books that on many accounts have changed people's lives. And I think it's important that you've made sacrifices, but you have made sacrifices, Andy, for the greater good. So I'm honored to be a guest on your show, but I think this is important relative to leadership for you to share that story.
Well, it was a breakfast event, and there were, I don't know, 800, 1,000 people there, and we were at round tables, and you're right, I wasn't the speaker. I wasn't part of that program, and so I was 3/4 of the way back, and the MC or whoever it was that was hosting it just said, he said, "Hey, Andy Andrews is here today, and Andy, would you stand up?" And I didn't. I just kind of went, "Thank you." And there was an older gentleman sitting at the table, and it's probably early 70s, and he leaned over and he said, Are you the writer?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He said, "I want to talk to you afterwards." And I said, "Okay, all right." And so afterwards, he came up to me, and he had a younger man with him that appeared to be about 40, I guess, 40, 45. And he said, "So you wrote the book, The Heart Mender?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I did." And he said, "Well, I just wanted you to know that several years ago, somebody gave that book to me, and at the same time gave that book to my son here, and neither one of us knew that they had given it to us. And we read that book, and that book changed everything for us. We had not spoken to each other in 11 years. And I was just stunned. Very grateful to be part of that, or honored to be a part of that. But I was amazed.
I think the sacrifices that business leaders make, or we'll take it back to the house, that parents make. I vividly remember some tough conversations that my mom had with me about the sacrifices that she would go, the measures at which she would take as a single mom to make sure that we ate breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. And you, as an author, you've made, if you were on this earth for no other reason than to write a book of your 28 that has helped a father and a son start talking again, I think you've served the community well. And yet you've done so much more than that. I think business leaders and families make a lot of sacrifices, but if you've got the skill, I think you have an obligation to use it.
Well, you're very kind, and I agree with you. I think that you do have an obligation to do something, and you, man, you are standing tall in this arena, and you're helping a ton of people. How can we help you, Eric? What can we do? Oh,
gosh. You can find me anywhere that podcasts are. The podcast is called Counsel Culture, COUNSEL. So it's to advise on culture. And I just love the support that I've gotten from the community. The listeners have given me feedback. They've given me guest suggestions, which have turned out to be folks that I never would have otherwise spoken to. And I've been so fortunate for that. But go listen to a show. If there's one that is impactful, share it with somebody else. These are not, in my estimation, these are not my conversations. John O'Leary was an absolutely incredible guest. I had someone that I have not heard from in many, many years. Someone I went to high school with said, Eric, he reached out to me, I think via email, and said, I hope this is the Eric Brooker from high school. I want you to know that this is the first episode that I've listened to. I found it as a happy accident. And John did not spend an hour talking to you on that podcast. John spent an hour talking to me. He said, I sat in my car and I cried, and it's exactly what I needed. I had another episode where I had a gentleman, Mike Gallagher. Mike had struggled with alcohol addiction. I happened to have posted the episode planned on the same day that I unexpectedly lost my sister-in-law to alcohol addiction. I redid the intro to appropriately address the day that I was having, which was, again, the day that I'd planned to drop the episode. I had a gentleman reach out to me and say, Eric, I was 550 days sober getting out of the shower. I had a towel around my waist. I found your podcast and I listened to it as I was getting ready. Eric, when I woke up, 550 days was just the number I needed to go celebrate. And I wasn't going to tell my wife. I was going to go have a drink. And I listened to your podcast. I listened to the conversation with Mike Gallagher, and I immediately went into the kitchen and shared with my wife what I was planning to do and that I needed help. And so the conversations that I've had, the guests, including Andy Andrews, that I have had, the conversations are changing lives. And I'm so blessed to be a part of that. So again, ericbrooker.com, find it where you're listening to podcasts, and just share it with others.
Well, we'll have it on the show notes. And I want to keep up with you, okay, personally and professionally. And I've got a few suggestions for you for guests too. So
I love it.
We'll get together on that. But thank you, Eric. Thank you for taking your time, and thank your family for sharing you with us today. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm Andy Andrews, the professional noticer, harnessing common sense and wisdom to plow through challenges all the way to an answer for you. And I think that'll do it for this week. Get us out of here, Matthew. So, ladies and gentlemen, and to the boys and girls who aspire to become ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of another episode of The Professional Noticer. In a world where common sense has become a superpower, I'm harnessing that tiny bit of mental energy I have for you, seeking wisdom, making observations, and endeavoring to answer tough questions in a way that will empower your family and your business. I'm Andy Andrews. Until next week, goodbye. This episode of The Professional Noticer was produced by Matt Limpert. The Noticer theme written and performed by Sugarcane Jane. Hidden cameras provided for the cast and crew by Twinkle and Smoke of Beverly Hills. Additional financial consideration provided by Young Brandons Anonymous. Do you have a son younger than 10 years of age? Did you name him Brandon? We feel your pain, and that's why we've created a support group for your child. Young Brandons Anonymous provides a safe place for boys who carry this now unfortunate name. We understand that for a second or third grader named Brandon, this is a confusing time. What may seem to him like an entire stadium of strangers chanting support and encouragement just to him can be a momentary self-image boost, but that boost won't last long if he's not a member of Young Brandons Anonymous. According to records on Baby Hub, more than 70,000 boys have been named Brandon since 2012. Young Brandons Anonymous is filling a need for these special young men who would like to live the rest of their lives without being told, "Let's go," another single time. Checking online for local meetings available is what you need to do. Punch and cookies are always served as the boys hear speakers who are now 45 to 75 years old, but once had somewhat similar unfortunate experiences with names when they were just babies. They were just names, but now those names are used in different ways. This week's speakers on a Zoom call to each secret location will be Butch and Gay Peters, Young Brandons Anonymous, offering real help for those whose names have been hijacked.